We all know someone who is stuck in an unhappy, dysfunctional relationship. No matter how many times they try to leave, they always go back to their abusive, manipulative partner. They're obviously not good for each other, and despite their best efforts and their partner's repeated promises of change, it never gets better. Is that someone you? Are we hardwired to desire misery disguised as excitement, constant anguish disguised as affection, and toxicity that is masked as romance? Is it nature or is it nurture? Or is it all these damn TV programs we grew up watching?
I just need to think a little bit.
Don't leave me.
How did you get in here?
The window? I'm not a dominant. I'm not. The right term is a sadist.
Do you do that a lot?
I like watching you sleep. I get off of punishing women who look like you.
Like your mother.
That doesn't seem a little crazy to you.
Now I hate you, you
Well, I hate
bastard!
you. If you leave here, I hate you.
What
Hey, you
have you
if you
been
leave
paying
here.
attention to anything that's been happening?
I guess not. I think I must have misread all of those
I
signals.
guess you did.
I'm the bad guy.
You're not.
You're psychotic.
You're hyperbolic.
I'm not.
All right, put him up.
Just like the saying, you are what you eat, I believe that you are what you watch, at least to a certain extent. And that becomes especially obvious when you're an easily influenced and highly impressionable teenager, with no real notions and ideas of what healthy relationships are meant to look like, except that of what we see in our homes. And in some cases, these relationships are not exactly the best reflections of healthy ones. So what happens when you are presented with one show after another with relationships that seem exciting, enchanting, and even ideal, not in spite of their toxicity, but because of it? The film industry, which is one of the most influential media outlets out there with an audience of billions of people all around the world, has a major role in influencing our view of the world around us. Whether we like it or not, some of what we see on our screens is bound to get to us. This is exactly why the whole video game violence debate was such a major issue in the last decade, because what we watch matters.
And the problem is that kids imitate what's on TV. So not only are they imitating it, but when they watch it a great deal, that becomes their reality.
And writers seem hellbound to market extremely unrealistic/unhealthy relationships to its younger audience. This, mixed with all the other media outlets such as TikTok and Instagram, which are even worse, all makes the perfect recipe for disaster. And if not disaster, then at least disappointment. The continuous productions of films and television shows that we watch on a daily basis often feature toxic and abusive characters in a glorified role. Furthermore, it becomes highly problematic and dangerous when these unhealthy relationships become desirable because they are excessively romanticized and marketed as something that we should want. God forbid our life would be boring, predictable, or even stable. Disclaimer before I begin. I love all of these movies that I'm about to discuss, especially The Phantom of the Opera. I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but Gerard Butler's Phantom is one of my favorite depictions of the character. I actually like him more than the opera version. While the opera singers of The Phantom are obviously more musically capable,
abandon their defenses.
but there's just something about Gerald Butler and his earthy, kinda rough voice that humanizes the Phantom for me.
Senses, abandon their defenses.
Yes, I'm aware that he is meant to be this musical genius, and Gerald, God bless him, is definitely not that. But I can't help that I love his Phantom, and it's just an opinion at the end of the day, so please don't hate me.
That's my opinion!
Also, I'm not trying to be all woke and overanalyze every single media out there and call your favorite character toxic. But I'm a huge fan of film and I love looking into things, and I honestly feel like this needs to be talked about more often. Plus, the history behind it is really interesting. Part 1. The Bad Boy Trope. The problem with Hollywood's idea of romance becomes extremely clear when we examine what is known as the bad boy trope. As far as I can tell, the stereotype of this character first appeared in the movie Rebel Without a Cause in 1955, with the introduction of James Dean's character Jim Stark. The movie follows its main character's story, Jim, who is a troubled teenager with anger issues and a dependency on alcohol. In the very first scene of the movie, we are treated to a scene of a very drunk Jim being brought into the police station. He is reprehended for his underage drinking and public intoxication, but the movie doesn't take a long time before redeeming his character by providing a sympathetic reason for his behavior, which is his troubled home life. Jim has an overbearing, controlling mother and what he views as a submissive, weak father, and his grandmother, well, she's just mean. All of this results in an unstable home environment, which he refers to as a circus.
It's not a place for kids.
A minute ago, you said you didn't care if he drinks.
He said a little drink.
You're tearing me apart!
His dysfunctional family dynamic is explored in great detail, and it works well to make the audience develop compassion for him despite what happens later in the movie. As the plot of the movie progresses, Jim's character would go on to make one questionable decision after another, but the tragic backstory of his struggles at home would effectively shield him like an armor from any criticism which might have come his way. Perhaps Jim's greatest conflict lies with his view of his father, which, as mentioned earlier, is presented as weak and submissive to his wife. This affects Jim directly as he develops a fear of how society sees him. He doesn't want to be viewed in a similar manner as his father. As a result, he feels like he isn't sure where he belongs in the world. This becomes clear when we discover the word chicken to be a trigger for him. When called that, Jim engages in dangerous and even reckless behavior in an effort to combat his own internal struggles. The first time he is called that, he ends up fighting another kid in school, forcing his family to move to a new neighborhood. And the second time, he is goaded into racing a stolen car, which results in the death of another character. Thus, Jim's actions are presented as somewhat selfish and honestly reckless and even dangerous, but at the same time he is continuously humanized. He drinks because of his family dynamics. Sure, he gets into fights and drives stolen cars, but he also befriends the bullied kid that no one wants to be friends with. His actions result in the death of another character, a 16-year-old kid, but he was baited into doing so by way of his trauma. He obviously has anger issues as he is constantly getting into fights, even with his own father, but that's not Jim's fault. It's a direct result of his circumstances. Or at least, that's the feeling that we are meant to feel when watching the story unfold. And we do. The violence, anger, and alcohol dependency is all packaged into an extremely attractive, hard-to-resist package. James Dean, with his effortless charm, striking blue eyes, and put-together hair, is easier to forgive and sympathize with than, well, say that guy for example. And this is how Hollywood stumbled into a gold mine. Jim Stark would become the blueprint for the future of bad boys of Hollywood. A blank character which writers can put any actor in, as long as the actor was incredibly handsome, charming, and had a tragic backstory. The yin and yang of bad behavior, which paints the bad boy as sexy, cool, and dangerous, combined with the sad, sympathetic backstory that the audience can relate to and understand, provides a delicate balance which works every single time. Thus, while the bad boy trope is very problematic, it's also very effective. The script practically writes itself and the money earns itself. The bad boy would evolve across the years, but the basic formula set by Jim Stark would stay the same. A charming, incredibly handsome male character, often with striking eyes and whatever haircut that fits the style of his era, plus a trendy look. The black leather jacket specifically would be a staple, accompanied with a cool ride, either a sporty car or even a motorcycle. And finally, a sympathetic and often tragic backstory. And of course, swagger. You need to have swagger for this character to work, or else you end up with this guy. Johnny's suggestive but extremely enticing dance moves and dirty dancing set him apart from all the other characters and draws the audience to him. Damon's devil-may-care attitude and just the way the actor reads his lines put him ahead of all of the other vampires in the Vampire Diaries. Just as dark and mysterious while still being incredibly smart, quick-witted, and interested in literature and fine arts. Christian Grey is horrible, but he's also a millionaire, and his swagger comes from his fancy cars and his ability to swoop you off of your feet with a helicopter ride. justified. And I could go on and on and on. At his core, the bad boy is misunderstood. While he often has trouble with the law or whatever authority is represented in his respective show or movie, he has a heart of gold. He is constantly sprinkled with these small good deeds that are designed to make you forget all the trouble he brings, and he brings a lot of trouble. When I was reading about this trope, I stumbled across something called the dark triad. To overly simplify this complex concept, the dark triad is composed of 3 negative traits, those being narcissism, thrill-seeking behavior, and deceitfulness. And this is exactly what the bad boy is. His character is often overly confident, deceptive, manipulative, assertive, and selfish. All these qualities are negative, sure, but they're also something that we desire at some level subconsciously. We might not want to be confident to a level where we can be perceived as condescending, but confidence in of itself is not a bad thing. It's a desirable trait that is often hard to achieve in our daily lives. And because it's so hard to get, it makes those who have it in abundance extremely attractive. Same thing can be said for selfishness. To a lesser level, it is desired too. Sometimes you just have to put yourself first, especially with society's rising ideas of self-love and self-care, and the widespread use of terms such as personal boundaries and respecting someone's spaces. Being selfish is not unhealthy to a certain level. Psychologists will have you believe that the reason that the bad boy trope is so effective is that women deep down desire protection. And this character archetype oozes testosterone and is overly masculine, confident, jealous, and overprotective. The hypermasculinity is not always represented physically, but they sure cut the attitude down. And I am in no way saying that that is a bad thing. I kinda honestly agree with this idea. Thus, the overly confident and hypermasculine image of the bad boy makes him extremely attractive to women. Accompanied with the cool look he often has, makes him desirable to us almost on a genetic level. This is made worse by the idea that you can change him, and he often does change for that one special girl. I'll cover the idea of the special girl in more details later, but the female protagonists of these movies often succeed in changing his character to some level. Her love softens him up just enough to make him a good partner. The irony of this, however, is that what makes him most attractive to her, and in turn the audience, is his overconfidence, hypermasculinity, reckless behavior, and assured self-image, which in turn means that he is not a character easily willing to change, and perhaps by changing into what fits society's standards, it takes away the qualities that she found attractive in the first place. The bad boy almost by definition is someone who can't be tamed. So how can she tame him? And would she still want him if he was tamed? Damon Salvatore is an example of this. His character first appears in the first season of the Vampire Diaries, and he is presented as the villain of that season. He represents the bad boy trope to a T. He's got the good looks, the striking blue eyes, sarcastic, charming demeanor, and he even comes equipped with a leather jacket and cool ride. But most importantly, his actions fit the criteria of the bad boy stereotype. He is aggressive, manipulative, and kinda psychotic. His character is redeemed by his love for Elena and even Bonnie at some point, as the two become best friends and she humanizes him just as much as Elena does. Add to that his backstory of his love for Catherine and the subsequent rejection he receives from her.
45 years I've been missing you. I'll forget how much I loved you. I'll forget everything and we can start over. I just need the truth, just once.
Stop. I've never loved you.
And you've got the perfect combination of evil and empathetic. But as he falls in love with Elena, he slowly changes to a different version of himself. He goes from killing a dozen people, quite literally, and even killing Elena's younger brother Jeremy, to becoming one of the narrative's main protagonists. But in doing so, the writers kind of make him boring in the process. He loses the edge and the unpredictability which made him so popular in the first place. And thus the writers combat that by inventing a literal switch that vampires have, in which they can switch their humanity on and off in a literal sense.
Shut up, Dane. It's the easiest thing in the world. The part of you that cares, it just goes away. All you have to do is flip the switch, turn it off.
So whenever the writers need him to be bad, the switch goes off and boom, he's back to being dangerous, edgy, and charming. Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer has the exact same problem. A stereotypical bad boy that is redeemed almost to an extreme level. And he also gets a switch in his head.
Chip, they did to me. I couldn't help it. But the soul I got on my own. For you.
But I'm not going into details of his character as I already covered him in his own separate video. Now I get that I might be coming off as too nitpicky and that obviously a show has to have a bad guy. That's how you create drama and conflict, and without conflict there's no interest, and in turn there's nothing to draw your audience to your story. And that's all true and fair, but when did bad guys stop just being bad guys? Why is every bad character often redeemed, and why is the redemption arc almost always love? And not just love, but the love of that one special girl. Joffrey from Game of Thrones is considered to be the worst character of all time. No, but literally, Google says he is the worst of the worst. There is nothing redeemable in him. Ramsay and Cersei, also characters from Game of Thrones, are just pure evil, and the series never tries to twist whatever misery that happens to them into an excuse to sympathize with them. No, they are just bad, evil characters. And that's exactly why I love to hate them. And that's okay, bad people exist, we are surrounded by them. In contrast to this, the characters of young adult fiction often have characters do incredibly hard to forgive acts, and somehow they come back from it just fine. Spike and Daemon try to assault Buffy and Elena only to be redeemed by their love, and they are both forgiven by the end of the series. I'm not trying to be overly preachy here, but there's a huge problem with the depiction of such characters.
Why?
Especially when considering the audience watching and why this trope is so effective in the first place. It's my opinion that this trope is so effective due to two reasons. Reason number one is related to the audience that this trope targets, which is teenage girls. Teenagers are stupid, and I don't mean that as an insult, it's more of a fact. At that age, we just lack the life experience to be considered life savvy. Instead, we are driven by our basic desires/hormones to just have fun and live for the now. Generally speaking, no teenager is worried about debt, job, stability, and, well, the future. They want an adventure, excitement, and anything that is unpredictable. And that's precisely why this trope is so effective within this target audience. However, as women grow and mature, they develop a broader picture of what they actually need in life. And again, generally speaking, that is a partner who is capable and willing to work with you, compromise when need, and provide a stable environment in which both of you can grow and thrive. And thus the idea of a selfish, reckless man becomes less attractive and desirable. Furthermore, with maturity comes the realization that you can't, quote-unquote, fix him. People are not easily changed. It requires extensive work and commitment, and most importantly, people don't change for other people. Often they change for themselves. Thus the idea of being that one special girl that can replace years of therapy and self-work just by her love becomes absurd and unrealistic. Jaime Lannister, another character from Game of Thrones, a show which is generally aimed to an older, more mature audience, serves as the perfect example of this. His character is horrible in season 1. He pushes a child from a tower in the first season, and he continues to be morally questionable throughout the next 2 seasons. When he finally starts to change, however, and becomes what is considered as a more sympathetic character, he doesn't do it for love, he does it for himself. He is unhappy and unwilling to live with this version of himself, so he slowly changes. His growth isn't painted as easy or just a split-second decision. It's a long process, during which he literally loses a part of himself, his fighting hand, which held all of his identity within it.
Never forget that. This should help you remember.
This fortune.
Lost your hand.
My sword hand. I was that hand.
This is followed by the death of all of his children and the possible end of the world looming over him. Thus his journey to better himself is lengthy, complex, and full of struggles, tragedy, and pain. It's not just a switch in his head, and this makes perfect sense. How many times have you tried to quit a bad habit and failed miserably? Your family and friends could beg you to stop smoking from now till the cows come home, but you're never gonna stop, not until you want to stop. This brings me to the next point, which is kind of petty of me, but I have to address it. Bad boys have a lot of women in their lives. What attracts the special girl to them has attracted a million other girls before her.
Have you had many women?
What?
Have you had many women?
Baby, come on.
And the idea that they are willing to commit to one special girl all of a sudden is kinda stupid. In reality, he would still probably get bored and cheat on you. But these depictions on TV shows and movies always end when the relationship between the special girl and the bad boy just begins. In Dirty Dancing, Johnny and Baby start a relationship and the movie ends. But what happens after all the excitement and the chase is over? What happens when life happens? Why do all these movies and shows end when the boy gets the girl? Is it because the future is not so bright and his behavior is not gonna change. Anyways, the second reason why this trope is so effective is that it exploits our past traumas. One of the most haunting quotes I've ever read in my life is by Oscar Wilde, and it goes, "All women become like their mothers, that is their tragedy. No man does, and that is his." Psychologists believe that at least to some extent, we repeat the patterns of our childhood. Our early experiences of relationships have a significant impact on how we view and interact with the world around us as adults. For example, if you had a loving and supportive relationship with your parents, you are more likely to seek out and create healthy, loving relationships as an adult. On the other hand, if your home life was surrounded by negative and abusive relationships, then you are more likely to have trust and intimacy issues in the future. Thus, the environment of our childhood conditions and influence our futures as adults. The first relationship that we ever experience is not one that directly involves us, but it's the one that will haunt us forever. We absorb it and we probably seek to relive it in hopes of coming out of it with a different outcome, or maybe it just becomes the norm for us. It's what we expect from every partner we have. Psychologists also believe that the reason we attract toxic partners or crave the ups and downs of an unhealthy relationship is all due to the environment we grew up in, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Keep that in mind when I discuss the Phantom of the Opera and my controversial take on that. I say that now in hopes that you don't judge me in the next part. Part 2. The Phantom of the Opera and Jane Eyre. The 2005 adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera has a very special place in my heart, and I consider it to be one of my favorite movies of all time, alongside Gone with the Wind. I'm aware that the movie is disliked by a lot of people, and there are many valid reasons for all the hate it gets, but it doesn't really change my opinion of it. I watched it when I was younger, and I didn't just watch it, I experienced it. Throughout its long run of 2.5 hours, I was immersed in the world of the Phantom, surrounded by beautiful images and angelic voices. The story revolves around a 17-year-old aspiring opera singer named Christine and the mysterious ghost-like figure of the Phantom. Christine is portrayed as naive, deeply religious girl who, after losing her father at the age of 8 years old, is led to believe that there is an angel watching over her.
Father said, "When I'm in heaven, child, I will send the angel of music to you." My father is dead, Raoul, and I have been visited by the angel of...
The movie makes this idea more believable when it explains that the Phantom has been talking to her since the tender age of 8 years old. Thus, she grew up believing that he is an angel sent by her father, or in some interpretations that he is the spirit of her father watching over her from heaven. Now, this is obviously very problematic and grooming-like behavior, but it's not the main subject of discussion in this video. Throughout the course of the movie, Christine is seduced time and time again by the mysterious Phantom, who originally was meant to look like this, or this, or this, or even this. But instead, the movie makes the choice to cast Gerald Butler in that role. In doing so, the movie takes what is meant to be an intimidating and obsessive psycho killer and stalker and makes him extremely attractive. And I'm not complaining here, I love Gerald's Phantom. He is sexy in all the right ways. But that's exactly the problem. The Phantom was never meant to be sexy. His allure and control over Christine isn't because he is hot, it goes much deeper than that. The facial deformity of the Phantom is almost its own character. The Phantom was originally described as a walking skull-faced skeleton in the source material, but this is reduced to what can be described as a minor burn or even a severe allergic reaction. Gerald maintains all his handsome features throughout this movie, and this is a huge problem because it ruins the idea behind his disfigurement. In my opinion, his external features, which are described in both the book and the opera to be horrifying and deeply disturbing, is a direct reflection of the ugliness of his soul. Moreover, it's the whole reason why he becomes this monstrous phantom lurking in the shadows. He is rejected and abused by society, which is why he chooses to live in darkness and develops a deep hatred for people and society as a whole. He kills without remorse because in his view, people are horrible and they deserve it.
Which earned a mother's fear and loathing, a mask, my first unfeeling scrap of clothing. Pity comes too late, turn around and face your fate.
The Phantom is obsessive, controlling, manipulative, and extremely possessive of Christine's character, who is portrayed as a vessel for virtue and innocence. The scene in which the Phantom and Christine first meet is when he is upset with her for having another man in her dressing room.
Basking in your glory, ignorant fool, this brave young suitor, sharing in my triumph.
Her response of being apologetic to him and calling him master feels uncomfortable and wrong, which to its credit the movie delivers that message pretty well, especially with the age difference between the two actors.
Child, you shall know me. See why in the shadow I hide. Look at your face in the mirror. I am there inside.
He later commits 4 murders in an effort to gain access to her, and he even leans into the angle of being her father, or at least a father figure of some sort to Christine, in a manipulative attempt to gain her affection, which is obviously wrong on so many levels.
Far from my fathering days, you resisted your soul obeyed.
But when watching and rewatching the movie, I can't help but root for him, despite all these obvious and glaring red flags. And that's because of scenes like these. When the Phantom seduces and practically kidnaps Christine the first time, they descend underground to his dungeon in a scene that is highly romanticized. Their literal descent into darkness is accompanied by a horse ride, followed by a boat ride surrounded by fog and mist and romantic lighting. Add to that the epic soundtrack that plays and amazing lyrics, and the audience, just like Christine, is completely mesmerized by the Phantom, and his dark and mysterious character is just the cherry on top. The appearance of this version of the Phantom goes a long way in making you sympathize with his character. While the Phantom lacks the classic leather jacket and cool car, he is still very much a member of the Bad Boy Club. He just gets a cool cape and a horse instead, which is honestly an upgrade in my opinion, and those piercing blue eyes and slicked back black hair are also effective. He oozes charm, and to me he is an even more effective version of the bad boy trope than the previously discussed characters. At its core, the story of the Phantom of the Opera is about the fight between good and evil, light and darkness, true love and obsession. While the Phantom is obsessive and controlling, Raoul is loving and protective. When the Phantom sings his epic single of the music of the night, he sings at Christine, not with her, with lyrics such as, his performance is all about control, and it aims to seduce Christine and the audience into his dark world. This is directly contrasted by Raoul's and Christine's duets, where they both sing together in hopes of building a bright, happy life which they can share as partners. But in the movie version of this story, evil or darkness, or whatever name you prefer to call it, is too close to winning, and that's because it's packaged in a misleading cover, a cover which is not really present in real life. Serial killers are not really redeemable, they're just not. But time and time again, Christine and the audience by proxy are close to letting go and surrendering to the music of the night. And that's because, compared to the Phantom, Raoul, whose character represents all the good and healthy parts of a relationship, is almost boring and predictable. And this is a direct result of the casting choice for the Phantom and the lack of commitment of making his character what he was always meant to be, a monster. In the final act, things escalate when the Phantom threatens to kill Raoul if Christine doesn't stay with him. They go back and forth in a beautiful harmony, but when she kisses him in an effort to show him that he is not alone, his character is instantly changed and he lets both of them go. However, in reality, the Phantom would never let Christine go, and certainly not because of her one act of kindness toward him, which magically makes him realize all of his mistakes and essentially fixes him. No, he would cling to her and continues his possessive and controlling ways. Things wouldn't get better, it would only get worse. When I watched the opera version of the Phantom, I got the sense that Christine's inability to resist the Phantom lies in her belief that he is an angel sent to protect her. She develops this complex relationship with him as a father figure, or at least as a protective mentoring figure, and thus she is unwilling to give up on him. His seduction of her is more emotional rather than physical, and when I looked into the book, which the opera and the movie is adapted from, it only strengthened this impression. The emotional manipulation is more clear in both versions when compared to the movie, where Gerard Butler's Phantom with his peanut allergy and sexy outfits is hard to perceive as manipulative. If anything, I didn't see why they couldn't just end up together. He is good looking, extremely talented, and she is obviously both mentally and physically attracted to him. Oh, the murders? What's a few murders in the face of true love? Maybe she can fix him. We can put a switch in his head and hope for the best. It worked for Damon and Spike, so...
Turn it off.
Apparently, the stereotypical bad boy, or in this case man, was present since the 1800s. As far as we know, he preceded time itself. Jane Eyre is a novel by the English writer Charlotte Bronte. It was published in October 1847, and it has over 16 adaptations to the big screen. The story revolves around Jane Eyre and Edward Rochester Fairfax, who is, despite his charm and my love for his character, is often self-centered, selfish, rude, moody, and condescending. He is what you might call at that time not agreeable, or unagreeable. Not entirely agreeable? Anyways, in the book, Mr. Rochester was originally described to be of middle height and considerable breadth of chest. He had a dark face with stern features and a heavy brow. He was past his youth but had not yet reached middle age. Perhaps he was around 35 years of age. Furthermore, Jane Eyre would go on to say when first meeting him that she felt no fear of him and but little shyness. Quote, "Had he been handsome, heroic-looking young gentleman, I should not have dared to stand thus questioning him against his will." Unquote. In summary, Mr. Rochester was never described in the book as handsome or attractive even. In fact, Jane develops an attraction to him because she grows to love his character, never his looks. But throughout the years and several adaptations, Mr. Fairfax would go from looking like this to this, and later this, and eventually this. And you probably already see where I'm going with this. The character of Rochester changes slowly as he meets what he refers to as his equal in Jane. He opens up more and the allure of him becomes more obvious. He is also naturally accompanied with a tragic backstory that does a good job of justifying why he lies and manipulates Jane. But it never excuses his actions, and he faces severe consequences as a result. He and Jane are the closest to soulmates as you can get. Their love is true and all-consuming. The dilemma or problem with their relationship is that he is already married, to what the book refers to as a madwoman. But rather than disclosing this information to Jane, he deceives her into marrying him under false pretenses, and when Jane finds out, she doesn't rush to forgive him. Instead, she leaves him. Which was not an easy thing for her to do. She loves him with all her heart, so much so that she doesn't think she will ever marry or love anyone else other than him. But she leaves him just the same, because of her principles and strength of character. In his desperation to keep her, he offers for them to live together outside the realm of marriage, but to Jane that is unacceptable and she refuses to become his mistress.
All is changed, sir. I must leave you.
Be my wife.
You have a wife.
I pledge you my honor, my fidelity.
You cannot.
My love until death do us part.
What of truth?
Who would care?
I would.
You'd rather drive me to madness than break some mere human law.
I must respect myself.
Jane is not seduced by him into giving up her morals. His charm and hold over her and the audience by proxy is strong, but it doesn't break the basis of what's right and wrong. Furthermore, he faces severe consequences for his actions, and despite his best effort, he doesn't win Jane back. She chooses to return to him when she is able to be his true wife and live with him in what she perceives to be the only moral way. She goes back on her own terms, and most importantly, she never compromises her beliefs for love. The moral of the story is, don't be a Christine. Be Jane Eyre. Part 3. The Special Girl Trope. In order for the bad boy trope to work, you need the trope of the special girl. The two stereotypes work hand in hand to paint an unrealistic picture of love and romance. The special girl, in contrast to the bad boy who is reckless, outgoing, and overly confident, she is often naive and innocent, and thus she is easier to manipulate, or at least more likely to forgive the bad boy character for all the mistakes he's going to make. Furthermore, she is shy, awkward, quirky, and almost uncomfortable in her own skin. Apparently, that's the writer's attempts to make her more relatable or likable, I guess.
She's with me.
I carried a watermelon.
Anastasia from 50 Shades of Grey comes to mind. Anna, throughout the course of these books and 3 movies, would go through attempted murder at least 3 times, along with multiple kidnaps attempts and a lot of arguments and 2 breakups by my count. She would also get quote-unquote punished by her partner in the first movie, who likes abusing her physically because she looks like his mother.
Yes.
Why do you want to punish me?
Anna.
Why do you want to hurt me? Why do you even want to do anything to me at all, Christian?
I get off on punishing women who look like you.
Like your mother.
Yes.
But despite all of this, the books and movies are considered to be romantic, or dark romance. But what is romantic about all this abuse and manipulation that Anna has to go through? And worst of all, who wants to watch a character so, stupid for 6 hours and 9 minutes? Well, apparently a lot of people do. The movies made a lot of money, but hey, at least they are marketed to an older audience, and the absurd plot makes them almost unrealistic by nature. Anyways, moving on. Where the bad boy trope relies on attractiveness and effortless charm of its actor, the special girl doesn't have to be attractive at all. In fact, it almost works against her. She's designed to be plain so the audience can see themselves in her. All of her characteristics and her personality as a whole is vague. She's an empty vessel which the audience can project their own unique personality into. Bella from Twilight and Anna Steele from 50 Shades of Grey are the perfect example of this special girl trope, with their counterpart male character constantly stalking them and even terrorizing them, while their disturbing situations are painted as peak romance. In reality, Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey are not romantic stories, they are horror movies, or at least really badly written psychological thrillers. Frances, nicknamed Baby, who is the main protagonist in Dirty Dancing, is an older but still effective example of this trope. Despite being the main protagonist of Dirty Dancing, the movie never goes into details of her life. Instead, it focuses on the life of her bad boy, Johnny. The movie deliberately paints her with as little color as possible, while at the same time making her awkward and relatable, or whatever that means. Baby's role in the story is to bring out the best in Johnny, his good side, while he brings out the rebellious side of her, and honestly he just gives her a personality. Before him and without him, she's boring, ordinary, and annoying, which makes you wonder why he even liked her in the first place, and why you were meant to relate to her. The 2018 Netflix series You paints a more realistic picture of what Edward Cullen or Christian Grey would be like in real life. Joe, who's the main protagonist of You, is a stalker, and the show never hides that from its audience, or attempts to romanticize it. And while the show maintains a certain amount of sympathy for its main character, it clearly paints him as a psychopath. And the end result is a somewhat realistic depiction of a real-life situation that happens to a lot of people, and I loved it for that, or at least I loved the first season. It still has disturbing dynamics of relationships, excitement, and thrill, but it doesn't hide behind the guise of romance. Part 4. My final thoughts and conclusion. Now, I'm not saying I'm gonna boycott Hollywood or anything like that. I'm all for fantasy. In fact, I probably watch too much TV for my own good. But there's an obvious problem when you paint such negative situations in a flattering light, and especially when your target audience is more likely to internalize these depictions. The genre of romance, specifically young adult fiction, is kinda dangerous compared to other genres. When you're watching a horror movie, for example, your emotions aren't hyper-engaged, and reality isn't so altered by what you see. Aliens are not likely to descend from the sky and kidnap you anytime soon. But relationships are something that we all experience and are likely to relate to. We internalize some of these relationships, at least subconsciously. I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I was really young, and I don't think I should have watched it at that age. And it wasn't because all of the vampires and the violence, but it was me thinking that a Spike would show up in my life. The fact that Spike was a vampire wasn't the unrealistic part, it was that he was a psychopath for 120 plus years, but is completely changed and redeemed by the love of that one special girl. So when you think about it, if Spike could be redeemed after a century of, well, evilness, then why not Joey, who cheated on you 5 times? Give him another chance. At least he didn't murder your younger brother and try to assault you, I guess. What's even more concerning is that the romance of young adult fiction seems to be dictated by the desires of the fans and the audience watching, which are again teenage girls, naive teenage girls. It engages the audience on a whole new level. You are either Team Jacob or you're Team Edward. Do you want Elena to end up with Stefan, or do you want Damon? And the writers are aware of that. They listen and they accommodate their tween audience. Pretty Little Liars thrived in giving their fan base one of the most popular ships ever, which was between a 15-year-old girl and her high school teacher. And I thought the Phantom of the Opera's Christine and her daddy issues were bad. But anyways, obviously this is so wrong, and there are so many videos on YouTube discussing just how wrong this relationship is. It's worth watching, honestly. And aside from being extremely illegal, it's just gross. But YouTube is filled with edits of these two as if they were the modern version of Romeo and Juliet. And what's the target audience for Pretty Little Liars? I'm so glad you asked. It's teenage girls. The show is rated TV-14 for, and I quote, violence, sex, and frightening scenes. I guess they forgot to mention the illegal parts.
Shame. Shame. Shame, shame, shame. Shame on you.
Anyways, The Notebook is peak romance. There's no way around it, but it's also kind of delusional. If Noah looked like this guy, the whole movie would fall apart. Plus all the fighting and arguing and the whole Noah writing Ali 365 letters, ew, creepy, didn't really age well. And didn't Ali cheat on her perfect Captain America boyfriend? This movie is trash, but I'm still gonna watch it, which brings me to the next point. So, are the future generations doomed by bad writers and inappropriate television? Well, not exactly, but it's definitely food for thought. Studies show that at one level or another we are influenced by our TV screens. There's a ton of research out there about this topic, and to be fair, there are conflicting opinions. But one study stood out for me. It was done in Austria and it aimed to investigate a simple question: is the death penalty still active in Austria? So the researchers asked this question to the subject of the trial, and were surprised to see that 11.6% of all participants answered yes, which might not be so alarming on the surface. But when you keep in mind that the death penalty hasn't been active since the 1900s in Austria, kinda makes you think, why do 11% of people still think it is? Well, researchers came up with a theory, and that theory is television. You see, in Austria, like a lot of other countries, American TV shows and movies are very popular. And what does America have? You guessed it, the death penalty. In this case, reality was really altered by television, at least for 11% of people. And that makes total sense when you consider just how much media we consume on a daily basis. The average person watches about 141 hours of TV per month, or 1,692 hours per year. Assuming you reach the average US life expectancy of 78 years old, then that means you've watched 15 years of television, which is wow. And if you can be influenced into accepting that the death penalty in your country is still a thing, even though it's not, then is it a stretch to think that toxic and abusive relationships can be normalized by TV, at least within teenagers? The cultivation theory is a social and communications theory designed to explore the long-lasting impact of media consumption, specifically television. It hypothesizes that individuals who invest more time in watching television are prone to perceive the real world through a lens aligning with the prevalent depictions and television messages, in contrast to their counterparts with lower television viewership but comparable demographic profiles. Furthermore, advances in brain science since the early 2000s has proved that teenagers' minds are fundamentally different from those of adults. Biological changes in the brain that occur during adultness I can never say that word, I'll just put it on the screen, make young people more impulsive, reckless, and less able to make measured decisions. And because of that, they're more likely to be susceptible to bad TV than, say, well, you and me. And they are constantly being bombarded with one trope after another that simply doesn't exist in reality. Bad television is the no longer active death penalty, and is it really a stretch to think that at least 11.6 people are gonna grow up thinking that their country still has an active death penalty? In conclusion, Hollywood is trash, but it's our trash, and at the end of the day, as long as we can remember that it is trash, then there is no reason why we can't enjoy it, I guess. Shows like early Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad are rare. They only come every once in a while. Meanwhile, we got sadist millionaires, evil but not so evil vampires with switches, and extremely delusional characters to keep us company. Thanks for watching, and maybe subscribe?
This is Jane Eyre.
How'd you do, sir?
Except that I really hate her, and I'm glad she didn't end up with any of them. Snack. Sexy phantom. Blue-eyed snack. Phantom looking like a snack. Hot. Murder? So, he's back. He's back with vengeance.